Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I will of course be discussing the by-election results, which were won emphatically by Labour, how it shows that the party haven't missed a beat with the last week's bad headlines, how the Tories still don't see Rishi Sunak as an asset, and how Reform UK's results, although better than they have been, and certainly of concern to the Tories, do not show that their national polling is worth it. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, where do I start? First thing to point out, I suppose, was that Labour achieved huge swings, including the second greatest ever from the Conservatives to Labour in post-war history in Wellingborough. Interesting context, because some pollsters have shown a closing of the gap between Labour and the Tories nationally this week. And, I said last week, the gap had been widening a bit, and you look at the problem is people look at the snapshots. Oh, Labour have gained, it must be this. Oh, Labour have lost, it must be this. You have to look at long-term trends because it goes up and down, up and down. I said last week, it's probably going to correct itself. And when it did, people will instantly look at the news for what was it that caused it. Whereas in reality, it's just a rebalancing. So when you have the polls narrowing, at a time when Labour have had negative headlines about, say, their green investment changes of plan or the fiasco in Rochdale, people naturally think, oh, it must be because of that. But if you looked at the individual polls on those two issues, it showed that most of the public, and especially most Labour voters, supported the party's position on both issues. And then there are these by-elections. Proof that nothing's really happened in the last week or so in terms of the national mood, really. So all we've seen in the polls probably is a bit of noise. Cannot emphasise enough. Yes, people expected Labour to take these seats. However, remember, Labour can only expect to take seats like these. These are bellwether seats, so they only expect to take them when the national mood is with them. When Labour wins seats like this, it means they're on course to win the general election. But it's not just that Labour won. It's not even that they won comfortably, which they also did. It's that they won by a much greater margin than was, well, certainly a greater margin than was predicted. So much so that I actually wonder if yesterday's recession news boosted attendance a bit. Naturally, the Tories reacted to the results with a big old drag on the copium cylinder. Jacob Rees-Mogg saying the results weren't as bad as he expected. Absolute rubbish. Also, how is this a defence of his party? Oh yeah, we got absolutely hammered in what have been safe seats for over a decade, but I'm surprised anyone turned up to vote for our party at all. He stuck to the tired line of, oh, it was just our voters stayed at home, they might turn up for the election. Now, yes, of course, turnout in by-elections is lower than general elections, quite a bit lower, but that's because the people who vote in general elections, but not by-elections, they're the ones who see their vote as a vote for the government. Now, in a by-election, you can't change the government. Certainly not this by-election. The Tories still have a healthy majority. So the ones who stayed away but will turn up at the general election are those who want to vote for the government. And the bulk of those are not really thinking they want a Conservative government again. Any Tory voters who just stayed at home, as he put it, will be staying at home in May as well. A spokesperson for the Conservative Party itself said, oh, the government of the day rarely wins by-elections. Rubbish. If the party of government is on course to win the following general election, yes, they absolutely win by-elections of seats which were safe for them. Marginals, different matter. Marginals, the ones that are always tricky. Yes, okay, protest vote can sink you there. But in terms of what was a safe seat at the last election, no, you retain those if you're going to win again. They also said that both of these seats had been Labour recently. Recently? By recently, they mean 14 years ago. That was the last time either of these seats had a Labour MP. Just before the Tories took both the seats and the government. That's the nature of being a bellwether seat. They also, in fact, actually, no, Wellingborough was won by the Tories in 2005. So actually, for Wellingborough, you've got to go back 20 years before Labour had an MP there. They also said that these seats required smaller swings than other recent by-elections. Again, absolute crap. Not that the swing required matters as much as the swing achieved. And when Labour got their second biggest ever swing in modern political history, yeah, keep puffing on that copium. Jacob Rees-Mogg also suggested the results showed that they need to chase after the Reform UK voters because, there's a lot of common ground between the two parties. Interestingly, during Rwanda debate last night, there were Tory peers who were complaining that the Conservative Party were not at all run by Conservatives these days. Now, certainly, if Jacob Rees-Mogg thinks that there's a lot of common ground between Reform UK and the Conservative Party, he's basically admitting that it is not remotely conservative. And speaking of Reform UK, so how did they do? I said before, those would be the really interesting results. I said before these by-elections, their performance so far strongly suggested that their national polling was hugely inflated. Now, they did do a lot better in these by-elections. They got 13% of the vote in Wellingborough, 10.4% in Kingswood. Those are much more respectable shares of the vote than they were getting last year. But for me, still show that their national vote share is a bit inflated. Because here's the thing. First of all, in a by-election, those only interested in voting for governments don't bother voting. So it amplifies the protest votes or the votes from people who want to vote for a different party. If voters were really wanting to give the Conservatives a message that they should be more like Reform UK, and especially given that the news was making it clear Labour were expected to win anyway, it was like giving any non-Labour voters or non-tactical voters a free hit. Reform UK should have absolutely been smashing it this week. They should have been getting above 15% easy in both of the constituencies. They should not have been getting just what the national polling says they would in a general election, because that national vote share that's sort of in the polls, that's for everywhere in the country, across the whole country, including the areas where you wouldn't it averages out across the areas where you wouldn't expect Reform UK to do well. So in an area like this, in like leave voting areas, they should have been doing much better. Plus, when you add in, as I say, the protest factor of a by-election, Reform UK should have been doing way better than this. So they will hail their results, don't get me wrong, they always will. They will go, these results are marvellous. They're not, they're crap. Wellingborough in particular was a very ripe plum for them. Leave voting area, bellwether seat. When I say that, I mean a voting population which doesn't mind switching its vote around. A by-election positively encourages protest voting. Ben Habib, recognised name. Everything was set up for them, and 13% was all they managed. They will not manage that much in the general election unless they massively increase their appeal. What the Reform UK vote showed was that the party are attracting more support than last year, driven largely, I think, by the Tories constantly amplifying their message like idiots. But they aren't going to be a dominant force in the election on this basis. They're not even going to get up to UKIP 2015 levels on this basis. Now, don't get me wrong, they will garner enough votes to cost the Tories extra seats. If Nigel Farage does throw himself into the campaign when the election is called, that could also make a difference. But on the evidence of these by-election results, Reform UK are still having their national vote amplified in most of the polls. I keep pointing out, if you want to look at Reform UK share of the vote, Ipsos probably have the most accurate view of them. There's something about the other pollsters using online methods that, for whatever reason, I don't know what the reason is, seems to amplify Reform UK's share of the vote. So the idea of the Tories chasing after Reform UK voters but abandoning swing voters in the centre, it's just going to cause them more trouble. Yeah, that's what they're going to do. Jacob Rees-Mogg said, if you add up the Reform and Conservative vote, it's more than Labour's. Now, that was true in Kingswood, which was the one he was talking about. That's the one near his own constituency. But the implication is, all these Reform UK voters would absolutely be prepared to vote Tory under the right circumstances. No, they wouldn't. Polling consistently shows that the bulk of them will never vote Tory no matter what. Some won't do it because they won't vote for the 14 years of proven Tory failure. Doesn't matter what their policies are. It's like, you're failing to deliver them. We don't believe you will deliver them. Some won't do it because the particular people in the party. They just won't vote for someone like Rishi Sunak, for example, or for David Cameron or people like that. Some won't do it because they've come from other parties. There were a small number who came from Labour or the Lib Dems, bizarrely. The Tories can only realistically convert a relatively modest number of Reform UK voters back. Yet they're arguably losing greater numbers of more moderate voters in trying to appease them. Finally, the by-elections also continue to show that Rishi Sunak is still not seen as an asset to his party. Yet again, he was nowhere to be seen on the campaign trail. Keir Starmer has been campaigning in both constituencies. Sunak was hiding from both. Didn't even tweet for people to go out and vote yesterday, much less ask them in person. You know, to look at Sunak's Twitter, you wouldn't even know there were by-elections on. But he can't pretend the general election isn't happening when he calls it. What's he going to do? Is he only going to campaign in the really safe seats? That's no good. Also, especially difficult because there aren't really any safe seats at the moment if people vote tactically. The Tories are in wipeout territory. As for all the usual Tory copium, you'll see today, you know, oh, our voters stayed at home. They'll be here for the general election. Oh, but there's no love for Starmer. The Tories were saying all that before the 1997 general election. It was bollocks then, and it's bollocks now. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.